My electric bill was $800. I found out my landlord was running a restaurant in my garage. The envelope in my hand felt heavy, heavier than 3 sheets of paper should ever feel. It was the kind of weight that sits in your stomach, not your palm. I was standing in the dim light of my kitchen, if you could call a hot plate and a mini fridge wedged into a hallway a kitchen, staring at the logo of the city power company. It was January 30th. It was freezing outside, a bitter, bone-chilling cold that seeped through the concrete foundation of this basement apartment and settled into my marrow. But despite the cold, despite the fact that I was wearing 2 hoodies and wool socks, I was sweating. I ripped the envelope open. The sound of the tearing paper was violently loud in the silence of the room. I pulled out the statement. My eyes scanned past the usage graphs, past the energy-saving tips, straight to the bold black box at the bottom right. Amount due, $842.15. I stopped breathing. My heart gave a single, painful thud against my ribs and then seemed to stop entirely. $800. My rent was $900. I looked at the usage graph. It looked like a skyscraper. In November, my bill was $85. In December, it crept up to $120, which I attributed to the space heater I ran for maybe an hour a night. But January? January was a vertical line shooting straight up into the stratosphere. No, I whispered, my voice cracking. That's impossible. That's a mistake. I dropped the bill on the counter. It landed on a layer of fine, sticky dust that seemed to coat everything in this apartment lately. I rubbed my thumb against the formica. It came away greasy. That smell. I took a deep breath, and immediately regretted it. The air in the apartment didn't smell like a home. It smelled like the inside of a fast food dumpster on a hot day in July. It was a thick, cloying stench of old, burnt oil, mixed with the sharp tang of onions and something rotting. I had been smelling it for weeks. It clung to my clothes. It clung to my hair. I went to work at the library, and my co-workers would wrinkle their noses when I walked by. "Did you get fries for lunch?" they'd ask. I hadn't eaten fries in months. I was eating ramen and peanut butter because I was trying to save for a car. I grabbed my phone and dialed the landlord, Mr. Henderson. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed, the background noise of a television blaring. "Yeah. What is it?" "Mr. Henderson, it's David from the basement unit," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I just got the electric bill. It's over $800. So?" Henderson grunted. "Rates are up. Inflation, kid. Read the news." "Rates didn't go up 800%, I argued, gripping the phone. "There has to be a short. Or a leak. Or the meter is broken. I'm barely home. I keep the lights off. Something is pulling a massive amount of power." "Look," Henderson sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the stupidity of others. "It's been a cold month. You probably left that heater on. Those things are energy hogs. I told you, utilities are in your name. You use it, you pay it. Don't bother me with your budgeting problems." "But the smell," I pressed. "Mr. Henderson, the apartment smells like a deep fryer. Is there something going on with the ventilation? Did a pipe burst?" "You're imagining things," he snapped. "It's an old house. It has smells. Maybe clean your kitchen once in a while." "I'm busy. Pay the bill or the lights go out. And if the lights go out, that's a lease violation. Goodbye." Click. I stood there, listening to the dial tone, feeling the blood rush to my face. He hung up on me. He blamed me. I looked at the bill again. $842.15. If I paid this, I couldn't pay rent. If I didn't pay rent, I was evicted. If I didn't pay this, the power went out, and I was evicted. I was trapped. I paced the small living room. The floorboards above me creaked. Henderson lived upstairs in the main house. Or at least, he claimed to. I rarely saw him. He was a ghost who only materialized to collect checks. But there was something else. A sound. It was a low, constant hum. Vrrrr. It wasn't the fridge. It wasn't the furnace. It was coming from the wall that shared a border with the attached garage. The garage was off limits. It was explicitly stated in my lease, tenants shall have no access to the garage or driveway. Garage is for landlord storage only. I walked over to the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. And then, a clang. The sound of metal hitting metal. Then a voice. Muffled, shouting. Order 22. Hurry up, the driver is here. Driver? I pulled my ear away. My heart was racing now. That wasn't storage. Storage doesn't shout orders. Storage doesn't hum like a jet engine. I grabbed my coat. I needed to see. I walked out of my basement door and around the side of the house. It was snowing lightly, the flakes hissing as they hit the ground near the garage. I stopped. Usually, snow accumulates. But the ground around the garage foundation was bare. It was melted. There was steam rising from the vents near the ground. I walked up the driveway. Henderson's car wasn't there. But there was a car. A beat-up Honda Civic with a DoorDash sticker in the window was idling in the driveway. A guy in pajama pants jumped out, ran to the side door of the garage, grabbed a white plastic bag from someone inside, and ran back to his car. He peeled out of the driveway, nearly clipping me. I stood in the bushes, hidden by the overgrown rhododendrons Henderson refused to trim. Another car pulled up. This one had an Uber Eats light on the roof. The side door of the garage opened again. A hand thrust a bag out. I crept closer. The smell was overpowering here. It wasn't just grease, it was industrial-grade exhaust. It smelled like a McDonald's kitchen that hadn't been cleaned in a decade. The garage door, the big main one, was painted shut. But there was a window on the side, covered with a thick layer of cardboard and duct tape. I stepped through the snow, my boots crunching softly. I reached the window. The cardboard had slipped. Just a fraction. There was a gap, maybe half an inch wide, right at the corner. I leaned in. I put my eye to the crack. What I saw made my knees buckle. The inside of the garage was a scene from a dystopian culinary hellscape. The space was packed. There were no cars. There were no boxes of Christmas decorations. Instead, there were 4 massive, commercial-grade deep fryers lined up against the wall where my bedroom would be on the other side. They were bubbling violently, spewing gray smoke into the air. There were chest freezers, at least 6 of them, humming loudly. There were 3 people inside. They weren't wearing chef whites. They were wearing dirty t-shirts and sweatpants. One guy was smoking a cigarette while flipping burgers on a flat-top grill that looked like it had been salvaged from a junkyard. Ash was dangling precariously over the meat. But it was the wiring that made my blood run cold. The garage didn't have commercial power outlets. It had standard residential plugs. To run industrial fryers and freezers, you need 220-volt lines. You need dedicated circuits. Henderson had improvised. Thick, orange extension cords snaked across the floor like a nest of vipers. They were plugged into every available outlet, but they weren't enough. I followed the lines with my eyes. They ran up the wall. They ran to a hole that had been crudely smashed through the drywall. That hole led to the utility room. My utility room. The one inside my locked basement unit, where the breaker box lived. I pulled back from the window, gasping for fresh air. He had drilled through the wall. He had tapped directly into my panel. I ran back to my apartment. I threw open the door to the utility closet. I had never looked closely at the panel before. I just reset the breakers when they tripped, which happened constantly, now that I thought about it. I shone my flashlight on the box. The metal cover was loose. 2 screws were missing. And there, coming out of the side of the box, were 4 thick, black cables that definitely weren't there when I moved in. They were jammed into the breakers, bypassing the safety switches, disappearing into a hole in the wall that had been sealed with spray foam. He was stealing my electricity. He was running a factory on my dime. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped it twice. I needed to call Henderson. I needed to scream at him. I needed to tell him to pay the bill right now or I would rip the wires out of the wall. But then I stopped. If I called him, he would lie. He would say I did it. He would say I gave him permission. Or worse, he would come down here. And those guys in the garage? They looked rough. They looked like people who didn't care about health codes, which meant they probably didn't care about tenant rights or physical safety. No. I wasn't going to call Henderson. I was going to call the people Henderson was terrified of. I went to my laptop. I opened Google. I searched for, report illegal restaurant. I found the number for the city health department. Then I searched for, report electrical hazard. I found the number for the fire marshal. I sat at my small, wobbly table. I took a picture of the breaker box. I took a picture of the bill. I wrote down everything I had seen through the window. I dialed the health department first. City Health, this is Brenda. Hi, Brenda, I said, my voice steady now, fueled by the cold clarity of revenge. I'd like to report a massive, unlicensed commercial food operation running out of a residential garage at 422 Elm Street. There are rats. There are people smoking over the food. And they are selling on DoorDash under the names. I quickly opened the DoorDash app on my phone. I searched for wings near me. There it was. Ghost kitchen names. Dave's Dangerous Wings. Burger Baddies. The Fry Guy. All of them showed the same address pin. My house. Under the names Dave's Dangerous Wings and Burger Baddies, I finished. A garage? Brenda asked, her voice perking up. Residential? Yes. No running water that I could see. No hand washing stations. And the grease is everywhere. We'll have an inspector there within the hour, Brenda said. That's a priority 1 violation. I hung up. Then I dialed the fire marshal. I have an imminent fire hazard to report, I told the dispatcher. My landlord has bypassed the breaker box to run industrial deep fryers in a residential garage attached to my apartment. The wires are hot to the touch. Clear the building, the dispatcher said instantly. Get out. We are rolling trucks now. I'm leaving, I said. I grabbed my backpack. I grabbed my laptop. I grabbed my cat, Mittens, and shoved him into his carrier. I walked out of the apartment. I crossed the street and stood on the sidewalk, shivering in the snow, waiting. It took 12 minutes. The first to arrive was the fire department. Not 1 truck. 3. A ladder truck and 2 engines. They take bypassed breakers very seriously. Sirens wailed, cutting through the quiet suburban afternoon. Henderson came running out of the front door of the main house. He was wearing a bathrobe and slippers. What is this? He shouted, waving his arms at the firemen jumping off the truck. Who called you? There's no fire. The battalion chief, a massive guy in turnout gear, walked right up to him. We received a report of illegal electrical modifications and hazardous materials. Step back, sir. You can't go in there. Henderson screamed. That's my private property. Exigent circumstances, the chief said, pushing past him. If there's a bypassed breaker, this whole block is at risk. He walked toward the garage. He sniffed the air. Grease, he muttered. Heavy grease. He didn't knock. He didn't ask for a key. He took a Halligan bar, a massive iron pry bar, and jammed it under the garage door. Crunch. He heaved. The lock snapped like a twig. He threw the door up. A cloud of white, acrid smoke rolled out into the driveway. The fireman recoiled. Inside, the 3 cooks froze. One of them dropped a basket of fries. Oil splashed onto the floor. Fire department, the chief roared. Kill the power. Shut it down. Move. Move. The cooks ran. They didn't argue. They scrambled out the side door, slipping on the grease-slicked concrete, and hopped the back fence. Henderson stood in the driveway, his mouth open, watching his empire crumble. Then, a white sedan pulled up. City of Chicago, Department of Public Health. 2 inspectors got out. They were wearing clipboards like shields. They saw the smoke. They saw the fryers. They saw the open buckets of raw chicken sitting on the floor next to a pile of old tires. They looked like kids in a candy store. A disgusting, violation-filled candy store. The lead inspector walked up to Henderson. "Are you the property owner?" she asked. I. Henderson stammered. "I was just storing some things for a friend. I didn't know they were cooking." "You didn't know?" the fire chief asked, walking out of the garage holding the fistful of orange extension cords he had ripped from the wall. "You didn't know your main power line was spliced with duct tape. And you didn't know about the rats," the health inspector added, pointing her flashlight into the corner where a family of rodents was currently feasting on a dropped burger bun. "Rats?" Henderson squeaked. "Sir," the fire chief said, his voice like gravel. "This structure is condemned. Effective immediately. You have disconnected the safety grounds. You have overloaded the circuits by 400%. It's a miracle this house hasn't exploded." He slapped a bright orange sticker on the garage door. "Danger. Unsafe structure. Do not enter." Then he walked over to the front door of the house and slapped one there too. "You can't do that," Henderson yelled. "I live there." "Not tonight you don't," the chief said. "Power is being cut at the pole. The wiring is melted inside the walls, sir. We checked with the thermal camera. You are lucky to be alive." I stepped out from behind the tree across the street. Henderson saw me. His eyes narrowed. "You," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger. "You did this. You called them." I walked closer. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the bill in my hand. "You stole $800 from me, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice cutting through the cold air. "You stole my electricity to fry chicken in a rat-infested garage. You made me live in a fire trap. I was going to pay you back," he lied. "We were partners." "We aren't partners," I said. "I'm a tenant. And you're a criminal." A police cruiser pulled up. The fire chief had called them. "Officer," the chief said. "We have reckless endangerment, theft of utilities, and about 50 code violations." The officer walked up to Henderson. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some ID." They didn't arrest him on the spot, but they cited him. Heavily. I stood there as the utility company truck arrived. A guy in a hard hat went up in the bucket and physically cut the line to the house. The hum of the fryers finally, blissfully, died. The silence was beautiful. "David," Henderson hissed as the cop wrote him a ticket. "You're evicted. Get your stuff and get out." "You can't evict me," I smiled. "The house is condemned. The lease is void. And by the way, I'm suing you for the utility bills, my moving costs, and the return of my security deposit. Triple damages. I looked it up. The health inspector walked over to me. "Sir, do you live here?" "In the basement." "I'm sorry," she said genuinely. "You can't stay here. The air quality alone is toxic. The mold counts from the grease humidity are off the charts." "It's okay," I said. "I have a friend's couch." I spent the next week on that couch. But it was worth it. The fallout was spectacular. The health department fines totaled $15,000. Operating an unlicensed food establishment, pest infestation, improper storage, lack of sanitation. The fire department fines were worse. $25,000 for the illegal wiring and creating an immediate hazard to the neighborhood. And the utility company? They don't play. They calculated the theft based on the equipment capacity. They hit him with a bill for $10,000 in stolen power and meter tampering fees. Henderson had to sell the house. He sold it as a distressed property for pennies on the dollar because nobody wanted to deal with the remediation costs. I took him to small claims court. I didn't even need a lawyer. I just showed the judge the photo of the wires running into my breaker box. The judge looked at the photo. He looked at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," the judge said. "This is the most egregious case of landlord abuse I have seen in 20 years. I got my judgment. $5,000. It covered the electric bills, my deposit, and punitive damages. Henderson is currently living in a small apartment on the other side of town. I heard he drives for Uber now. Not Uber Eats. Just Uber. He's not allowed near food. I found a new place. It's above a bakery. It smells like fresh bread every morning. Sometimes, when I pay my electric bill, which is a reasonable $60, I think about the Friars. I think about the greed that made a man risk burning down his own house just to sell soggy wings to strangers. He thought he was a genius entrepreneur. He thought he was disrupting the industry. But in the end, he just disrupted his own life. And the only thing he successfully cooked was himself. So, tell me. Am I the monster for calling the authorities and leaving my landlord homeless and bankrupt, or did he simply get burned by his own grease?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.